when people receive a handwritten note, in whatever context it's in, they're going to understand the amount of effort and sacrifice it took on your part to do that. Because it would have been easier to send the email. It would have been easier to send the text. It would have been easier to send a form, thank you, a form, way to go, you did a great job. I'm sorry your mother passed away. Like those human things we can say to each other. But especially in the context of a leader or a direct manager, someone we see as busy, that's what makes it even more powerful. Someone you don't even know who's 2 layers up from you, that thinks what you do, like the CEO and the hospital worker, you don't even think recognizes what you're doing. They realize they see how busy you are. They see where you are in the organization, like, oh my God, he or she took time out of their day. This is how important I am. This is how valued I am by this organization.
Welcome to Narrative's Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome DeRoy and Julianne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Hi, and welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome DeRoy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julianne Ryan, and it's always good to be here.
Great, thanks, and good to see you, Julianne. Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners, as always, to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcasts, leave a review, and also check out our YouTube channel. All of this, there are many references and resources in the episode notes as well. So really encourage you to also go to narrative.com, narrative.com/podcast, where you'll be able to find our entire vault of episodes, and yeah, lots of things to listen to. But for today, I want to put the spotlight on our guest, Amy Daughters, who is an award-winning author and keynote speaker. She believes in a world where what makes us different is the very thing that connects us instead of separates us. She brings that world to life by helping people reconnect to each other through the power of handwritten letters. She brings her wit, humor, and having written 580 handwritten letters to every single one of her Facebook friends to show you how you can find deep connections in some of the most unexpected places. Really excited about this, and welcome to the show, Amy. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, thanks for coming in, and I can honestly say that we have never had someone specializing in handwritten letters. So I'm really excited to dive into this. But before we do that, very curious about something that we ask about all of our guests, actually, and that is, what's a story you could tell us about an experience that has shaped who you are today?
Right. And I thought a lot about this because I have a lot of good stories. And I realize this is a podcast about stories, but, I was lucky enough to have a father who was such an out-of-the-box thinker. And he had this summer camp that he started for his grandkids, but he employed us as the staff. And I remember one summer he would come up with these crazy themes, and the older he got, the crazier it got. And he said, I read this book called The Cave of the Clan Bear, the Clan of the Cave Bear, and the series of books. And he was so fascinated by it that he wanted to do this ceremony at camp where we came out in these tribal costumes, my brother and him and I, as these tribal leaders. He was going to paint his face a certain way. We made fun of him. It was pure craziness. We were going to have this ceremony where he took each of the grandkids and told them what their spirit animal was, and basically assigned them an animal based on their attributes, how he saw them. And my brother and I laughed about it and we made fun of it, but we did all the things that he told us to do because that's who we were. And so we get to the ceremony. I mean, my brother's beating this drum he made. I'm carrying a torch across the field. Everyone's like, what is happening? And then we watch my father name each of our children and give them a little rock with their animal on it. And that's the animal he saw him as. And then in that moment, I saw my brother and we both had tears in our eyes, and we're like, this is literally one of the greatest moments we've ever seen. And then after Dad passed, we realized that he had given these kids the gift of, here's how I saw you. And
Mm.
that is an example of who my father was. And he inspired me. He didn't sit down and tell me, hey, go do some crazy stuff and believe in it. He showed me over and over again. And that's a perfect example of how I want to live my life. And it has given me the confidence to do my own set of crazy, insane things that have had results that I could have never imagined. And I'm sure people were sitting on my sidelines going, she's nuts.
We always say the best stories are in the room. We just have to listen for them. And this is an example. Wow. We were not expecting that. I was thinking you said you got a box note, for a present, and you always were taught to write them after you got a birthday gift. So that's where my brain was. And this was so cool about acknowledging people and having fun and saving the parents thousands of dollars, because this was probably much more cost efficient way of entertaining the kids. But how
Right,
cool is that? The simple things which were in reach
right.
that he could do and make it special. Wow.
And if you think about that, it does parallel, and I don't think I've ever thought about this before with the letter writing, because he made each of those kids seen and valued. And that's exactly what a handwritten note could do. It's like we use different, Dad and I use different avenues to get to maybe the
Mm-hmm.
same emotional response.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Because that's what struck me, what you just said now, and actually, Julianne, you said it too, the acknowledgement and, here's how I see you. And yeah, the same thing struck me about your business and what you're specializing in with these handwritten letters. So it's really interesting that you also connected that and hadn't necessarily thought about that before telling this story today. So I really want to thank you for that. And it's just another example to me and for our listeners that shows that that happens a lot, doesn't it? You sort of come up with a story because someone asked you a question like we just did. And then your mind actually goes back and says, hey, you know what? That's actually connected to this. And that happens so often. And we often get people who, are hesitant to tell a story or try to kind of put the horse before the cart and sort of, instead of actually, and there's like, well, what should it be about? Or how do I get back to this thing that really matters to me? That's the story I need to tell. And the truth is that
Mm-hmm.
whatever you might be doing, there are so many stories, so many experiences that you can actually link up and you've never thought of it before. But it usually links up almost anything in your past. And so that'll be an interesting thing to look at the data for, can we actually literally take any of our experiences and link them back to something that we're doing right now? So thank you for that. Thanks for that example. But yeah, go
I
ahead,
just
Julie.
have I just have to be selfish for a minute, because it resonates with me that not only your father gave you permission to be creative and think and do things differently. Imagine the ripple effect for all these kids. Like when they went back to school and they said, what'd you do in your summer vacation? Well, my grandfather dressed up as a bear with Klansmen and gave me a rock. It's like,
That's the best summation of that event. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, but how cool is that? Like, yeah, we were a little different, but how permission to be different, and he was vulnerable, and wow, that is so precious. I'm not going to forget this story for sure. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, and I wonder, so I did want to do want to get into what it is that you do and the specialization of, the handwritten or the specificity, I should say, of handwritten letters. What did spark that journey, and what did you discover kind of along the way by writing all these letters to people in your network, as we said in your bio?
Right. Well, I was just minding my own business, and I didn't try to go on a letter writing journey. This was a non-intentional, and I think that's why the results were so, um, you know, profound, really is the best word for it. But I basically got on Facebook one day, and I thought of an old friend, looked her up, there she was, boom, we hadn't spoken to each other in 30 years. We had spent like maybe 6 weeks at a summer camp. We were both loud and thought we were funny, and I remembered her. I go and look, she's got 5 kids. The youngest is the only boy. He has cancer.
Oh,
He's fighting for his life. And I became inspired, like a lightning bolt hit me in the head. I'm going to start writing them supportive cards
Mm.
at the beginning, notes to the Ronald McDonald House in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was being treated. Now, I hadn't spoken to her, zero contact in 30 something years, never met the kid, and hadn't written anyone a handwritten anything in probably 25 years. I mean, I grew up that way, like many of us did, but it's not like
Mhm.
I went, this was my whole game. And so I was just a writer, a freelance writer, and a first time author. And the lightning bolt hits, and I start sending these people notes, knowing I'm kind of being irrational, a little bit crazy the whole time. So I send the pair notes for probably 10 to 12 weeks. And then unthinkably, tragically, and there are no good words for this, the boy Parker passes away at only 15 years old. I mean,
Mm.
utter devastation, everybody's worst nightmare. And so I knew it had nothing to do with me. I sent the condolence card, but then I was like, I felt like there was something else I needed to do. So mini lightning bolt. I continue to write her, only now I don't have her address. So I find her husband's law office address and I start sending the letters there. That's crazy, and I get it. But I couldn't stop myself. There was some force compelling me to go onward with this. So, and again, I received permission from my father, who said, let's be crazy and beat drums in fields. And so my drum was continue to write this woman. So I wrote her for probably 4 or 5 months, thinking the whole time, she lost her son. Why are you doing this? But I couldn't stop myself. And then lo and behold, about 5 months in, I go out to my mailbox and here's a 10-page handwritten letter from this
Mm.
woman, Dana. And she talks about her grief. She talks about all kinds of things. At the end of the letter, she said, I didn't know I was going to say any of that, but I feel better saying it. And this
Mm.
kicks off 2 years of us pen paling. We write letters back and forth. We don't talk. We don't text. We don't do anything else. And we had this free space between us where we could say whatever we wanted to. I didn't feel like I needed to respond to her grief, or she didn't respond to my stuff, because we didn't even know where the letters were or who was reading or when they were reading them. So there's this vacuum created between the two of us. It was like a safe space. And then the best part to me was I didn't know how she voted. I didn't know where she stood on any specific issue. I didn't know what she thought about religion. I didn't know what her socioeconomic level was. All I knew was I cared about this person because she had opened up and she had listened to what I had to say. And that was more important. And we would say just ridiculous things like, I've never told anybody this, but here, a person on the other side of the mailbox, I'll tell you because I trust you. I trust you. And so after about 8 months of this, I watched this kind of change my perspective on a bunch of stuff in my life. I was like, this is incredibly special, but what else is out there? Like, this is one girl in this list of 600 random people that I knew to differing
Mhm.
degrees at different points in my life. So what other untapped goodness is in this list of human beings? And so I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go all world bananagrams and I'm going to write everyone a letter. And so I stick everyone's name in a box. I buy stationery, I get a journal, and I go on this journey, which I think the journey is going to last like 12 letters. That was you didn't even know I set up parameters and all, I had a big plan and everything. But when I started writing these letters, and I started realizing the impact a handwritten letter or note can have someone in the age of instantaneous communication, in the age of social media. I watched this just blow people's mailboxes and hearts up over and over and over again. And I got to about letter 50 and I was like, this is going to change my life. And it took me 18 months, but I wrote 600 handwritten letters. And now, guys, I can't shut up about it.
But
I
it's
love.
so beautiful and so simple and just, I'm sorry I talked over there, Jerome, for a second in my enthusiasm, but simple. It's hiding in plain sight, just like the story was. And we talk about connection, and what a great example. I love also the fact you talk about no expectations, that you sent the letter when your friend was grieving without any expectations attached that you would get a response or something. And that's what real communication is, when we're giving and we just want to meet somebody where they are. And it just evolved from there. So what a great lesson, better than we can teach. You are living proof of what that means and how that can make a difference for somebody.
When I think what you said, Jules, the not expecting a response is so powerful, because a handwritten letter or note, and I think it's important to say note or letter because it doesn't have to be 2 pages.
Mm.
It can be 2 sentences and have the same impact, but you're not asking anyone to do anything. We are so uh, programmed to expect a response that it messes, like you said, with the point of connection and communication. But then when I wrote the Facebook letters, I could not keep up with responses. So that even further diminished my need for response. But I realized one of the biggest takeaways of this project was you don't need a response to validate that you made a difference to someone, whether it's professionally, personally, because this really can be used anywhere.
Yeah, no, I love that. And on that note, actually, you mentioned it doesn't have to be a two-page letter. I'm curious about an example that you've seen of, a really short note that had a kind of outsized impact.
Right. Well, now that I speak to, because when I first started speaking about this and I wrote the book, I saw it as an inspirational personal topic. And then the first thing that really happened, I got invited on a real estate podcast, and I was like, okay, I'll come on. And I don't think they had a pre-meeting. It was one where you just went on cold. But I'll say yes to anything. But I was like, I don't understand like how I fit into your topic. But then I realized that anywhere where there's two human beings trying to relate, there's an arena with two human beings in a relationship. This is a super powerful tool.
Hmm.
And they talked about, after talking to me, they set up this thing called November, where they wrote one client every day for 30 days
Hmm.
during the month of November. And they just wrote one or two sentences rather than a whole note. And this is something they're going to practice all the time. And I think they use it during the year because they realized just writing this short note in a referral based business just blew the whole thing up because they set themselves apart in this attention economy that
Mm.
in a way that no one else could. And it did not take 2 pages. It took 2 sentences.
Yeah.
More specifically, I spoke with someone who had a CEO write a note to them for an idea they had when they were a nurse at a big hospital like 12 years ago. And I was speaking to him, and he went around to the back of his room and pulled this note out from 12 years ago with
Hmm.
3 sentences in it from a CEO that he worked for 12 years ago. And the note is in his nightstand.
Ah,
Mm. Wow. Yeah. I have handwritten notes like that I've kept for at least a decade, from different people that I've worked with or who've expressed appreciation, or or we had that sort of correspondence. Yeah, and it does. I mean, I don't know if there are any studies about this, but it certainly the act of writing something by hand, as well as the act of reading something that was written to you by hand. There's got to be studies that show that there's more going on than with an email or a Facebook message or whatever.
Well, there is science to because I know the plot twist in all of this is the person who really comes out ahead in this whole transaction is the letter writer, the note
Mm.
writer,
Mm.
because handwriting, whether you're journaling or writing a letter, it releases some endorphin in your brain that cannot be released any other way. And I think it changes our thought process. It slows it down, and it's a more intentional act. And I think that certainly on that side of the transaction, I can say this because I've experienced it so many times. It releases something in you that can't be released otherwise. I think some of
Mm.
it's perspective. If you're writing to another person, you look at them differently, you see them differently, and you see yourself as the bearer of goodwill, which changes everything.
Yeah, yeah. So on this podcast, as you know, we talk a lot about leadership and engagement. And I know that you've turned this into a business. And so how does that? How have you sort of translated this art form that you first did for yourself, by writing to all these people, into a business? And what kind of, what have you seen, I guess, in terms of leadership and engagement?
Right. Well, we all know employee engagement is a dumpster fire. I mean, it continued to to dive, and now it's just in the gutter. I mean, there's nowhere else to go but up. You know.
And by the way, just one thing I just want to add to that. I was at a conference this week. The the statistic as of 2025 is that 31% of employees are engaged at work. 31% are engaged. So that means that the vast majority, two-thirds, are actually either not engaged or actively disengaged. So yes, it is a dumpster fire. Go ahead.
Right. Right. So we know that. And then this idea of a handwritten culture where you incorporate some systematic, you know, note writing campaign, whether it's a leader writing to an employee, whether it's a team member writing to another team member, introducing this into a culture and an organization is absolutely has the potential to be a game changer. Because if you want someone to really be seen or heard or valued, then just simply sitting down and writing them a handwritten note. And what you said, Jules, is so good. This tool is hiding in plain sight.
Hmm.
That those are the perfect words. I wrote them down. It's almost too easy. It's almost too simple. But just recognizing it can be used in so many different ways. But to recognize someone, to offer support, it's 3 sentences in a note, and to make that a part of your regular culture in an organization, a part of your own leadership model. And again, it seems almost too simple, but it has the power to absolutely drive turnover rates back down, retention rates back up, employee engagement. That number will go up, and I've seen it happen, not because I planned for it to, because I show up to these things and I realized I've got this incredible tool to share with people that we all
Hmm.
have as human beings.
Amazing.
And the comment too with that is in some organizations, somebody would show a note that they got from a senior person thinking, I didn't even know they knew who I was. So
Right.
it's one thing to get a form letter or one thing, but when it's given to you or left for you, and it doesn't have to do about age or gender. I have a young man in my life, he's not a DNA nephew, but he's like a nephew to me. And now he's in his, middle 30s. When he was little, he was in high school, he sent me a thank you note by hand in this age of texting, ghosting, and everything. And it just blew me away. But what he also did forever is he wrote notes to his professors, to his teachers, and appreciation. And they all became champions of it, not because of just the notes. It was who he was in the class and experience, but it solidified the relationship. You made a difference, and thank you. So I think it's a simple tool that needs to get more popular and
Right.
instituted.
Right. And I when people receive a handwritten note, in whatever context it's in, they're going to understand the amount of effort and sacrifice it took on your part to do that. Because it would have been easier to send the email. It would have been easier to send the text. It would have been easier to send a form, thank you, a form, way to go, you did a great job. I'm sorry your mother passed away. Like those human things we
Mm-hmm.
can say to each other. But especially in the context of a leader or a direct manager, someone we see as busy. That's what makes it even more powerful. Someone you don't even know, who's 2 layers up from you, that thinks what you do, like the CEO and the hospital worker, who
Hmm.
you don't even think recognizes what you're doing. They see how busy you are. They see where you are in the organization, like, oh my God, he or she took time out of their day. This is how important I am. This is how valued I am by this organization. And like you said, you said it perfectly, Jules. Those people became champions of that kid. Those people will be champions of you as the leader, be champions of the organization,
Hmm.
champions of the cause, champions of the team, just with this little simple, you know, 2 sentence deal. And it does not have to be 2 pages. If it's sincere and it's specific, you're going to win every single time.
Mm. I'm curious, how do we all know I mean, look at us now, we're all in different places. We're using Zoom to connect. It's all about technology, and that's what connects us, et cetera. And it's a kind of digital first world, especially for younger generations, right? And so I'm curious, when you enter, a workplace and you're presenting this stuff, I mean, how do you approach that? How do you sort of say, I'm going to talk to you about this ancient art that, that for those of you who are, you know, 40, probably 30 and under, you've never even heard of, to sort of write letters. How do you kind of introduce this? I mean, do you workshop things with people? Do they kind of practice writing notes, or how does that work?
Well, in my keynote, I talk about employee engagement. I talk about the dumpster fire. I talk about interpersonal relationships. I talk about how we feel siloed now. And after
Mm,
COVID, we're like you said, we're in different areas. I talk about how technology is a good thing, but it's left us feeling isolated. I talk
mm,
about AI and how this is emotional intelligence. It's almost every step we take further into technology, this practice becomes more powerful. And so
mm,
I do all that. But even in my keynote, we sit down the entire group sits down and writes a one line, two-line note to someone at work
Mm, mm,
saying, I appreciate you, saying you did a great job, saying I worked with you on this, or saying something personal like, you lost your mother, the team and I are all thinking about you. Just something human and simple, and then see what happens next. And I do have a 2-hour workshop shop where we dive much deeper into this like 3-step process of creating a handwritten culture.
wow.
And I think this is amazing because we've been migrating in the last year to hybrid situations, and some people are still working virtual, maybe part of the week, and then they're in the office. But when you're in outside in cyberspace someplace, the fact that you got a physical entity shipped to you with a note is speaks volumes that we know you exist, you're still breathing out there, and we might not see you. And that shows trust, that shows appreciation and a deeper, and just so many layers we can peel and discuss what this means. So simple things really matter. So good for you for championing that.
Well, I just fell onto it, but there is something very tactile. I think this feeds a lot of our human needs, which, we spend a third of our lives at work. The average person works 90,000 hours of their life, so why wouldn't this be something that would translate into our work life and improve it on a bunch of levels? But there's something so tactile about a
Mm,
handwritten note or letter. I'm holding in my hand something that you held in your hand. And whether we're BFFs or not, that as a human being, there's something you cannot gauge. Like you said, to your point, Jerome, there has to be science attached with how that has a deep impact on us that almost, to me, this has more power than anything except for maybe money, like money, woo. But
Or if
this
you
has
send me
something
food.
deeper. Yeah. Or food. Yeah. But it's so much deeper, but it does not. And I think the thing I see, the hurdle I see people, when they try to get themselves to do it, once they get there, they realize they can reap so many benefits from it. But it makes you feel vulnerable. Like, what's going to happen if I do this? Like, what is this going to look like? How is this going to be received? And I think part of my job as the the messenger of this is helping to coach people to get over those hurdles of, but it's all the hurdles I faced in writing Dana and writing all the letters and the letters I still write. So I can speak to that so much because if you can just, it's like everything else in life. If you can believe your own crap just long enough to take one step forward, it can
mm.
change the whole world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever live in New York? Because you really, like, you would belong with us, I swear.
No, I appreciate what a compliment though.
That's like a Queens girl analogy. It's like you get past your own crap.
Yeah.
You're good.
Well, and I
Right.
think that's such a, for me, the powerful message there too is that, you've got the story to back it up, right? So you've actually experienced what you're preaching
Right.
and you've gone through it. And so as a result, you know what those hurdles are, you know what those obstacles were for you and how you pushed through, right? And then look at where it got you. So I think that's always very inspiring, when we have someone who speaks to us and it feels like they're kind of talking at us or sending us a bunch of statistics and data, it doesn't resonate as much, but you've actually been through it and you've told us that story. So as a result, I'm much more willing to listen to you and to be a champion for you actually. So and that didn't take long. We've been here 20 something minutes. So yeah, I think it's a very powerful thing. And again, on that note of the handwriting and the tactile piece of it, I think that is important because I know that one of the things that the brain does, there's a chemical thing that happens between people when they're in person, when they're relating in person, that doesn't happen when we're relating on Zoom, and we're remote. And I think that's the piece of it. It's the piece of I'm in the same room as the other person. I can feel their vibes coming at me and mine going at them, even if it's completely unconscious. And it's this piece of paper, this note, this letter. There's something very satisfying for the brain about that. We respond to it much more. So no, I love it. I wish we had more time,
No.
but I want to make the most out of the 2 minutes that we have now, and ask you if there's anything that you want to leave audience with, or final words, message, recommendations? The floor is yours.
I would just say, and most time when I talk about this, when I have a conversation like this, people think of someone at work or in a personal context that they want to send a note to. I would say jump off the edge of the cliff and do it.
Mhm.
Just trust yourself one time. Just do it as soon as you stop listening, as soon as you, but run out and get the smallest card you can and write the two sentences, drop it in the mailbox or drop it in the inbox and see what happens next.
Oh, I love it. What a great call to action. Well, thank you so much, Amy, really for coming onto the show and telling us about this really unique process that you have. And I encourage everyone who's listening to go into this episode's notes and find your links and resources. And as you said, yeah, it just takes one action, and it doesn't take a lot to take that action. So really invite everyone to follow up on that call to action. And thank you, Julianne, for being my
Yeah,
wonderful
thank you.
co-host once again.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure.
Yeah, this was a great one. Thanks again. And I do want to remind our listeners to go and review this episode and other episodes that you've enjoyed. That's what drives the word of mouth. Wherever you find your podcasts, go to narrative.com as well, narrative.com/podcasts. You can also find many, many resources on our website and ways that you yourself can find, craft, and tell stories about who you are, what you do, and why it matters, and how that's going to call other people into action. So consider enrolling yourself and or your team into our group or one-on-one training programs. At the moment, we've got a very special offer for our listeners. You can use code NARATIV for a special 25% discount on a new on-demand course that we're doing in partnership with the New Mexico State University's Global Campus. It's all online, it's all self-paced and on demand, and it's a great introduction to what we do and how you can tell your story yourself. So go ahead and look for that in our resource page as well on narrative.com. And don't forget that special discount code that we'll also put into the links, NARATIV, 25% off. That's not nothing. All right.
That's
So
something.
thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. And as always, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always ready to listen to you. So thanks everyone. Thanks Amy. Thanks Julianne. And we'll see you all next time.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.